Here we go. Jake and Josh are here to analyze the game they love for the team they love. This is another Dolphins podcast. Here's your host, Jake Mendel and Josh Houtz.
Thanks for tuning into another edition of another Dolphins podcast. It is a massive week as the Miami Dolphins are over in Germany, and I am back to full strength because joining me today after trick-or-treating all across Pennsylvania, Joshua Houtz. How's it going, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. Yeah, we went trick-or-treating with the kids, got tons of candy, but like I also told you, we're all sick too. It just seems like as soon as school started, man, everyone's like, your kids are going to get sick, everyone's going to get sick, and I'm just like, no way. But I think we've been sick more in the last 2 months than we have in the last 6 years. So I'm here full strength, and I'm ready to do this podcast with you, man. How are you doing today?
I'm almost great because it's almost Friday, but until then, I think I'm just going to be, I'm solid. Josh, let's hope by like 4 years from now, your entire household just these superhumans who have now been able to fight off every single virus known to humankind. I think that's where you're headed here.
Yeah, I think the baby even had the C word when we first had her. So we've all been through the ringer here, but we're getting better, and that's all that matters. So again, man, excited to talk Dolphins football with you. And yeah, they're definitely going to be superhuman when they become older for sure.
Let's do it. Let's get right into this stuff. We're going to get into 3 different topics today. Tyreek Hill is your AFC Offensive Player of the Month. We are going to ask ourselves, should we be confident about Sunday's matchup between the Chiefs and the Dolphins? We'll get into some of the latest injury news as well. But first, I just want to give everyone a special shout out because I had a pair of shoes laying around, a pair of Pumas, and I decided I'd throw them on Twitter and say, hey, whoever gives us some feedback, some positive feedback, I'll go ahead and ship those to you. Our good friend Ivan won it. I just wanted to throw that out there and shout out everybody else who took the time to comment, took the time to give a review, 5 stars. I mean, that stuff helps us out so much. And Josh, I mean, we know that we're just doing this on our own, right? We don't have these players retweeting us. We don't have all these different companies retweeting us. We're just shaking our arms and moving. So every time you guys leave a review, every time you guys comment on YouTube and different things like that, it helps us out so much. So thank you so much for doing that. If you want to get involved with some of those giveaways, I don't know how often things like this will happen, but you can find me on Twitter at jmendel94, Houtz, Houtz. Find him on YouTube at Take Him to the Houtz. But Joshua, now that I got the big old song and dance out of the way, let's get into the biggest news of the day. Tyreek Hill was announced as the Offensive Player of the Month, the AFC Offensive Player of the Month. He finished the month of October with 600 receiving yards. Passing yards would be pretty impressive. And what was it? 4 touchdowns, I think it was?
Yep, 4 touchdowns. They came against the Patriots, Eagles, Panthers, Giants, and Bills. So they did play 5 games, I guess, technically in November. Because we went down to the wire. November. I'm already ahead of ourselves, October. But yeah, we are. But we're just excited because again, this is the first non-quarterback to ever be Offensive Player of the Month for the Miami Dolphins. First time back-to-back in team history. So it's pretty awesome. And then I even looked it up and saw that, credit to the Miami Dolphins, but Tyreek Hill never won it when he was in Kansas City other than on special teams. So, everyone laughed at us when the trade went down, laughed how he's going from Mahomes to Tua. Here we are, man. We're 2 months into the season, and we've had 2 AFC Offensive Player of the Weeks, and it feels awesome, and it's never happened before. So big things are happening in Miami, and we're all so excited for the team that's developing here and what's still to come.
Mike Cugno from CBS4 tweeted out, so after 30 years without an AFC Offensive Player of the Month, the Dolphins have now done it twice in 2023 with Tua in September, Tyreek in October. And hey, believe it or not, there's only been 2 months, so they might have to just name this the AFC Miami Dolphins Player of the Month. And who knows? Who knew we could get this cocky and have this much fun with this team? Joshua, I thought this quote was absolutely hilarious because following the news that broke about Tyreek winning Player of the Month, a reporter decided to ask Tyreek, do you think you can win MVP this season? Hill's answer was awesome. He goes, no, because we have a player that's on our team that's better than me and means more to this team. And his name is Alec Ingold.
Yeah, I saw that, and you love it because, we always talk about how under the radar Alec Ingold is and kind of that guy that goes out there, just does his job and doesn't really get noticed. So to have Tyreek throw a little bit of shade talking about Tua Tagovailoa.
It's so great because you really thought it's like, he's going to say Tua. You thought for sure it's going to say Tua, but I mean, that just kind of speaks to the personality Tyreek has. He even came out, I think, in the same press conference and talked about he doesn't really care where this game is being played, but he knows that the Chiefs are going to get the business either way. And on his podcast, the It Needs to Be Said podcast, I think he was talking about maybe 200. I think there was some joking to it, but second 200-yard receiving day, I think everybody in Germany would have a pretty solid understanding of who Tyreek Hill is after a performance like that.
Yeah, I mean, that would be amazing. I mean, they're going to come out here and try to game plan. I saw Justin Reed talking about how you stop the run, you can then contain Tyreek Hill. Whatever's going to happen, it's going to be a battle. And yeah, 200 yards, whatever it comes to. I mean, we've seen Tyreek Hill put up those type of numbers. So I'm excited to see the way the Dolphins go out there and match up with them. We do have to mention he is the quickest player in the Super Bowl era to hit 1,000 yards, right? I know we talked about that.
8 weeks, 60, 1960, I think was the last time that happened.
Something crazy like that. So, I mean, Tyreek Hill's just having a literal MVP caliber season. I guess, again, like he said, the only critique you could have is that Tua might deserve it a little bit more.
I think it's kind of funny if you look at Tyreek's stats every single week. You know, the Chargers, he led the team with 215 receiving yards. The Broncos, 157. He led the team with 58 against Buffalo. New York, 181. Carolina, 163. And Philadelphia, 88. And people might be asking, well, Jake, you just skipped 2 Patriots games. Well, both of those games, Waddle was the guy to lead the team in receiving yards. So, Josh, I think it's been pretty fun just to kind of see how this unit has evolved over time, right? Early in the Tua, Tyreek, Waddle era, it's just going to be these two. The volume's going to go right to these two, and they'll make it work. They'll make everyone happy just simply because of that. How have you felt the transition has gone this year where we're seeing a lot more of the motions? We're seeing Tyreek have to, let's say he has 88 receiving yards in a game, which sounds incredibly low, but in order for him to get those, he's, running probably close to 300 yards in the different motions he's doing. So can you kind of take me through, as someone who cuts up every single game and watches this offense, what you're kind of seeing differently this year from Tyreek?
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned the Waddle thing, and I think we all kind of felt like that was going to be his go-to guy because the rapport they had in college, but it just seems like it's now Tyreek Hill's, that quote-unquote number one guy that he's always targeting. Yes, Jalen Waddle's still phenomenal, but for me, it's just these short motions that we've seen. I mean, last year, you'd see the defense rotate, see the secondary kind of shift every time Tyreek Hill went in motion, and now you're just seeing these short motions where they just can't react. So it's creating space for him. He's creating space for some of those other receivers, and as you see, I mean, Tua Tagovailoa is in his bag right now. I mean, he's anticipating these throws. The chemistry that they have is just absolutely absurd. I mean, when you're cutting up a Tua cut-up, I mean, some of the balls where that ball leaves his hand to where it hits the receiver, it's just absolutely incredible. And you got to give Tyreek Hill credit because the way he runs his routes, I mean, you see the separation he gets with that speed because all these defensive backs have to be honest. So I think Tua's gotten better. I think Tyreek Hill's gotten better with those short motions, and it's allowed him to, get to the top of his route and break out quicker. And it's also opening things up for everyone around him. So we're starting to see this offense finally come together. Year 2 of Mike McDaniel, it just makes you wonder, Jake, where's the ceiling to this thing? Because right now it seems like every week we're breaking new records one after another.
Yeah, I don't know. Are they at the ceiling? I mean, they're averaging 34 points per game, which is the best in the league. Last week, they were 3-on-3 on fourth down, which is absolutely cold-blooded. But something about this offense I think we still have a big question about, Josh, is how this offense can operate with a lot of crowd noise. And this is technically going to be a home game for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that means that they'll have all their, different this is gonna sound, I don't have the right word, but songs, their different hype up noises and horns, whatever it may be. And then I think they could sell some more tickets as well. But how do you feel about this Dolphins offense going into a situation where they have to kind of rely on the timing much more when you can't hear Tua, calling out plays and things like that?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I think this definitely helps the Dolphins, right? I mean, it's not Arrowhead. It's not going to be nearly as noisy, but like you said, it's still going to be a little bit of a home field advantage. So I just think the Dolphins, you guys probably talked about in the last pod, right? But them getting there early has to factor in some way to this thing, right? They has to give them an advantage. But I know sports science, I saw someone on Twitter said that sports science says what the Chiefs are doing is right. So I always deter that stuff. I have no idea how that makes sense, but I think them getting acclimated to the situation. Also, the fact that it's not an Arrowhead Stadium is going to help because I don't know about you, Jake, but every time you see those international games, man, there are Dolphin jerseys galore. I saw Tannehill jerseys before. I know I've actually met someone over there, Ali, when I went over there for my honeymoon, who's a Dolphins fan, followed him on Twitter for years. So I think it's going to be a lot more Dolphin fans than we expect, but I think that's definitely going to help the Dolphins. But how this thing plays out, I mean, it's really anyone's guess because both these teams realize how important important this game is. And I think both teams really do want this one, despite, how the Chiefs might be downplaying it. Tyreek Hill, though, he has not been downplaying it at all.
And two, the Kansas City Chiefs are coming off a loss to the Denver Broncos, right? And everybody likes to go along with the rant of, hey, the Dolphins beat the Denver Broncos 70-20. Why couldn't the Kansas City Chiefs do something similar? I do think, and I'm not trying to make excuses here, I do think the AFC or the divisional games are always a little funky. They know you better than anyone else. And when you consider, Josh, what were the Broncos? God, their record is bad. I don't even know where to go from there, but the Chiefs played the Denver Broncos on October 12th and won that game 19-8. That was at Arrowhead. Having to go and play the Broncos again 14 days later, knowing you have to go to Germany and play the Dolphins the following week, do you wonder, or do you think that maybe there's a little bit of the Chiefs, I don't want to say they weren't caring, but kind of got caught looking ahead? You mix that with, Patrick Mahomes being a little sick. You mix that with the fact that you're not going to be 18 forever unless you're the Buffalo Bills losing to the Miami Dolphins in the 70s. Outside of that, it might be the 80s, potato. I just wonder if we can't overlook the fact that this Chiefs team is still absolutely fantastic, despite losing to the Denver Broncos by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I know I'm going to get crap for this, but I mean, we can be honest, right? Patrick Mahomes might be the best athlete that we've ever seen play the quarterback position ever, right? I mean, what he can do to that offense, I mean, even without Tyreek Hill, is absolutely absurd. I do think maybe some of it, you mentioned it with the division games. I mean, those go anyway. I mean, I don't sit here and think, the Chiefs are below the Broncos or even anywhere on that same tier. I mean, this is still a Super Bowl contender, defending Super Bowl champions. So I hope that the Dolphins aren't taking them lightly. Don't think for a second they are, but you wonder how much of them playing in Denver last week, made them fly home, then to Kansas City, then over to Germany. Maybe that's why they waited. But whatever it is, man, I think that this is going to be one of those matchups that, can you hear them? Could you hear that call? This is going to be one of those matchups where you truly do see, where the playing field is, right? We continue to hear all week long, can the Dolphins beat good teams? Can they beat good teams? If you go out there and beat the Super Bowl champs, no, it's not at Arrowhead Stadium, but it's over in Frankfurt. If you can beat them in that 9:30 primetime international game, then you're legit contenders, and then we can all start talking and going around and talking crap on Twitter.
The best part about that, Josh, is that we're entering the bye week, right? Whatever happens on Sunday, that's going to be on top of your mind for 2 whole weeks. So if the Dolphins can, make it to the bye week with a win over Kansas City and have those 2 weeks just to kind of hold it over everyone's head, I see Josh getting stressed about it, already thinking about the possibilities here. But that's where the Dolphins are at. Win or lose, we're going to have to deal with this outcome for 2 weeks. And I'm really looking forward to this game. I think it will be a lot of fun. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's get into some injuries. Joshua, the Dolphins have been dealing with plenty of injuries lately. 4 backup offensive linemen were on the field last week against the New England Patriots. Half the secondary was out there despite Jalen Ramsey coming back. So we are actually in a very weird week where we're getting a bunch of positive news about the Miami Dolphins and their injuries. Where I'd like to start is with Javon Holland, who has cleared concussion protocol. And on top of that, Vic Fangio has come out and said that he is so important to this defense. He is known as the quarterback of this defense. So, Joshua, we have the Pro Football Focus top safety coming back, joining this unit. What does it do?
Changes everything, I think, right? I mean, as cliche as that might sound, I mean, now you got Jalen Ramsey, you got your, like you mentioned, Pro Football Focus, #1 rated safety back there. You're hopefully going to have Xavier Howard back, right? So, I mean, now you finally are going to be able to see what Vic Fangio's defense can be. I'm intrigued to see what they do with Javon Holland because, as we'll talk about, Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift's boyfriend's an absolute difference maker, and we're trying to figure out who's going to be able to contain him because we know he is the best tight end in football, right? I mean, you don't even have to argue that. So who's going to cover him? And I think that could be, maybe an opportunity for Javon Holland to do some of that work. We know he's played in the slot before. We know he's comfortable moving all around. So for me, it just really goes back to hearing Vic Fangio, I guess Jalen Ramsey said it, right? I'm not a cornerback. I'm a defensive back. So I'm intrigued to see the way this whole thing works out, the way they shuffle Javon Holland around, Jalen Ramsey, Xavier Howard. I'm intrigued to see the way it all works out. So long story short, it means everything because he is the quarterback of that defense, and we all love Javon Holland.
And people forget he played a lot of slot cornerback, in college as well, which is a huge benefit too, just to that flexibility of what he can do to this offense. The Chiefs are fantastic at making chicken salad out of you-know-what. They're 4th best on 3rd down, and a big reason for that is because Patrick Mahomes' ability just to scramble and run away from pressure. I believe he's averaging about 30 yards per game. Josh, how does having Javon Holland, would you want to have him be someone who's spying Patrick Mahomes for a lot of the game? Or where would you think he'd be the most effective when you consider that there's already been some rumors that we might see some Jalen Ramsey versus Travis Kelce?
Yeah, I mean, I like that Jalen Ramsey versus Travis Kelce too, because when you look at their receiving core, I mean, there isn't no one that really stands out to you other than what I better get this
Rashid
name
Rice?
right. Yeah, Rasheed Rice. There you go. Thanks, man. Other than him, and I mean, Valdez Scantling, I mean, they don't really have those dynamic receiving playmakers. So I'd be intrigued to see Jalen Ramsey matched up with Travis Kelce and then what they do with Javon Holland. So, yeah, man, it's just so much intrigue because this is what we were expecting week 1, right? I mean, we didn't expect training camp, so or second day, I think it was. So I'm intrigued to see the way this whole thing comes together and the way this defense goes out there and tries to stop, again, arguably the best quarterback in football. I don't know if you have Jalen Ramsey or Javon Holland spine. Maybe that's a job for David Long. I don't know what it is, but you got to figure out a way to contain them because for years we've been gashed by these mobile quarterbacks.
And it kind of worked out in our favor if you go back to last year. I think Jerome Baker had like a 35-yard sack just on Patrick Mahomes just sitting back in the pocket and trying to make things work. Overall, man, I think the secondary is going to be such an interesting matchup to watch because you mentioned it. You hinted at it there. The Chiefs are really struggling when it comes to adding other receivers to the mix. Valdez Scantling actually led the team on opening night against Detroit Lions with 48 receiving yards. And then the following week, it was Sky Moore with 70 receiving yards and a 17-9 win over Jacksonville. So this is a group, man. They have not been – Patrick Mahomes has not had a lot of success so far this season. And then after you go through those first 2 weeks, it's Kelce. So it is kind of easy to get an idea of where this offense is heading, how it's going to attack a defense. It's going to be a lot of Travis Kelce. You're going to see Isaiah Pacheco try to get involved as much as he possibly can, despite he has a season high of rushing yards of 115. However, his next closest to that is 70 rushing yards. So Josh, Javon Holland, he's back. Jalen Ramsey had the first interception as a Miami Dolphin last week. And what does Xavier Howard do then? How does he get involved in the mix? How do you kind of frustrate Patrick Mahomes knowing that you have the secondary that you can kind of lean a lot on?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the pass rush get better throughout the weeks, right? I mean, last week we've seen Bradley Chubb get a sack slipping between the cracks of 2 defenders because that secondary latched down. So we've heard Vic Fangio say before, he doesn't want to move his corners around to shadow a receiver, but maybe later in the season he would, right? So I just hope that we can get a healthy X out there. He sounds like he's ready to go, right? I mean, it sounds like the biggest obstacles are on the offensive line, which we'll talk about. So I think X pretty much can shut down one side of that field. And as we saw last week, Jalen Ramsey kind of did the same thing. So for me, the biggest way to attack this thing and what scares me the most is that Travis Kelce and how the Dolphins can contain him. You mentioned Isaiah Pacheco, solid back. It looks like he's ranked 6th among Pro Football Focus running backs, which that kind of surprised me. But
he's an angry runner.
Yeah, he is. And I think the Dolphins, though, this year they've been pretty good against a run. So we'll see what gives here because the Chiefs do have a pretty good offensive line. But again, those weapons on the outside really do not strike fear on me other than Travis Kelce. So it'll be interesting to say. And I'm saying that. But again, this is freaking Patrick Mahomes, right? I mean, he's unbelievable.
Switching over to the offensive side of the football, there aren't too many big changes here, Josh. But the big one that everyone's keeping their eyes on is Robert Hunt. He did not practice on Wednesday. He actually did not practice on Thursday either with a hamstring injury. However, he was seen stretching. Josh, what do the vibes tell you about Robert Hunt?
Queasy.
Queasy?
Yeah, I'm queasy about Robert Hunt and even Teron Armstead. I mean, it looks like he's getting ready to go. He's jumping up and down,
He's
getting
dancing
excited
in every clip
Yeah.
I see, man. It
And
just gives you so
I'm
much
just
energy.
waiting, but you're just waiting for Sunday to come and them to be like, okay, Kendall Lamb's starting or something crazy. So,
Yes.
yeah, man, I do think that they're probably not going to have Rob Hunt, and that sucks because I think he's arguably probably our best offensive lineman. But I do think Rob Jones played pretty well over there. So, what is your how do you feel about this offensive line? Because I have written down here, Chiefs ranked 2nd in sacks with 28 and 4th in pressures with 85. So they got a pass rush that's pretty menacing.
Yeah, and they're averaging just 16 points allowed per game, which is absolutely crazy. The 24 points they allowed to Denver last week was the most they've allowed this entire season. That just goes to show how this Chiefs defense has really kind of remade this entire Kansas City Chiefs team. They are really relying on that defense to help them out, force turnovers and different things like that. I'm trying to find hints, right? Because a lot of the time it's as simple as Mike McDaniel. He's going to take it slow with these guys. But then I start thinking, the Dolphins arrived in Germany on Monday. Do you bring a guy like Robert Hunt if you know he's not going to play? Do you bring him just for the bonding experience? Am I reading too far into this? Probably, especially when you consider Devon A-Chain and Chris Brooks were two guys who also took the trip with them, even though both will not be playing.
Yeah, I thought you were onto something there. Then you just kind of made me, it just sucked my soul right out. It's like, I don't know if that was the right word, but you know what I mean? It's just the Miami Dolphins way this year, it seems, right? I think I read this was their 6th offensive line configuration. If Rob Hunt can't go out there, I mean, it's just crazy. So I think the one good thing is we talked about how good that defensive line was in the pass rush for the Kansas City Chiefs is they're not very good against the run. It looks like they're allowing the 7th worst rush yards per carry with 4.4, and in the last 3 games, they've allowed 135.7 yards on the ground. And Javonte Williams rushed for 85 yards last week against them on 27 carries. So it does sound like you're maybe able to run the football against them. But again, when you're in limbo, when you're playing musical chairs on the offensive line, I'm not sure how it's going to work out, but I'm here for it. I feel a lot better about this offensive line than I did at the beginning of the year. I don't know if you saw Omar Kelly, but he kind of threw some shade at me, quote tweeting my the Dolphins, they still have Liam Eichenberg and Austin Jackson and this and that, Jesse Davis. And, the offensive line's playing pretty good. So I have some egg on my face.
But I mean, there was nothing hinting at that before the season. Miami's offensive line being good is one of the biggest surprises of the entire season. And it's strange to think we kind of expected this offense to be awesome despite the offensive line maybe struggling. But Connor Williams has been awesome. He's one of the best centers when it comes to getting to the second level and trying to clean out some linebackers. We don't even have to talk about Teron Armstead. We know what he does to this unit and his ability to just kind of move the rushing game along. How many starting offensive linemen, let's assume the main group of Teron Armstead, we'll even throw Isaiah Wynn, Connor Williams, Robert Hunt, and then Austin Jackson. How many of those guys start on Sunday?
Well, we're not going to see Connor Williams, right? I can't.
So?
I mean, that's just me feeling queasy. Then I guess I don't know. I mean, I feel like he should be out there. What's he missed 3 of the last 4? I think.
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken. I forget who said it. Maybe it was Omar Kelly wrote it, but something about Liam Eichenberg. Do you think they might be trying to see if he's the long-term answer at center? That makes me feel absolutely queasy as heck. So I think we'll get. So I'm being a glass half empty, right? Is that it, or half full?
Nailed it.
I nailed it. Okay. So I think we'll have Teron Armstead. Isaiah Wynn's out, right? He's not.
He's on IR.
So what do we got? Lester Cotton there, and then you're trying to talk me into Connor Williams. I'm gonna have to say Liam Eichenberg. I'm sorry, man. Then Rob Jones, and then Austin Jackson. So that would be my offensive line. Hope Connor Williams is out there. And then what do? Do you then move Liam Eichenberg to one of the guard spots? What would you do, Jake?
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that they're looking at Eichenberg as like that long-term center. I don't necessarily
could be. He said could be. I don't want people to start quoting that or anything, but he did say they could be, and it's possible with the fact.
It's an interesting thought. But I think it'd even be more too that he'd be the stopgap center until they draft someone else more than maybe like the long-term type of guy. I don't think I want to have guys shuffling all over the offensive line. I think I'd rather them really dig in and learn one position. We saw Liam Eichenberg have to get action against some really tough teams like Philly, playing in Philly. So I think that stuff really helps them. And I think if you throw him at guard, it might derail stuff just a little bit. So I think I'd rather try to let these guys get comfortable. I think the one position where we see some sort of you can flip them and it's not a huge deal is left guard and right guard. I know there are people who are going to actually me, but I just kind of look at what Lester Cotton and Robert Jones are doing, right? Because the idea of this offensive line is, one, we're going to maul the opposing defense. We're going to go find someone and we're going to eat them. And then number 2, we're going to worry about technique. So I think maybe just knowing that base level of what this offense wants from the offensive line changes things just a little bit. I'd stick Kendall Lamb. I'd keep him as the backup left tackle. I'd have Liam Eichenberg be the backup center and just have confidence in the rest of the group you have, especially when you have Austin Jackson having the best year of his career. Robert Hunt, if he misses this week, he'll be back sooner rather than later. So I wouldn't shake the ship too much.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do agree with the guard spots, and I just hope these guys get healthy for the stretch run, right? I mean, you want to see Robert Hunt out there because he's earned this. He's been through so much with this team that you want to see him, have his chance to get his flowers. We're talking about the run game, Jake. Raheem Mostert, didn't he show up with an ankle injury throughout the week? I think he talked today and said that he's better now, right? He's likely to play. So that is a breath of fresh air because who would have it would have been what, Jeff Wilson and Salvon Ahmed then, right? And that
Mhm.
would have been your running backs. And Raheem Mostert, the way he's playing, you want him out there absolutely. So, how do you think he'll fare against, again, a Kansas City Chiefs defense that is pretty susceptible, pretty bad against the run?
I'm interested. This is going to be the matchup because I think if the Dolphins can run the football, it changes everything. There were even some Kansas City defenders who came out and they were asked, "How do you stop Tyreek Hill?" And the answer was, you stop the run. If you can stop the run, then you can get more eyes on Tyreek Hill. But if the Dolphins are able to run the football, all of a sudden it's going to be, oh no, there's a play action and Tyreek Hill's just running right behind you. I think we got to put a note on our foreheads, maybe write it in Sharpie that we can't focus on Raheem Mostert's Wednesday participation on the injury reports because it seems like every Wednesday he doesn't practice, whether it's vet rest. He actually came out and said today there was a hiccup with the ankle, but they seem to have it figured out, and he'll be good to go on Sunday. But man, I didn't get to talk about this yet this week. Something that caught me off guard is, Salvon Ahmed had a couple receptions last week in the New England game, and he really didn't do much with them. But Mike McDaniel came out after the game and really defended him and saying how he earned those snaps and how he earned those receptions and how he's earned being part of this offense. So how do you feel about how he fits in, especially when you have Jeff Wilson coming back? He was very limited in his first game back. That being said, he did look pretty good. He was a little flashy there, in part-time work.
Yeah, for me, I think Salvon Ahmed kind of fills that. Well, Devon Achane, when he comes back, he's going to be the starter, right? There's no doubt about that, most likely. He'll be right behind Raheem Mostert. He'll get some touches. So I kind of see Salvon Ahmed maybe getting, 5 to 10 touches a game or maybe less than that. I mean, that one play, he did have a catch last week, and we were kind of talking about how one went for, 20 yards or something, but it was a screen that was set up on a critical third down, I think, on that might have been the final drive of the game. My memory's toast, but you know what I'm saying. Salvon Ahmed makes plays when you need him to at times, and then there's times when you kind of teeter and go the other way, and you're like, this is basically Myles Gaskin again. So I think you go into this riding Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., however you want to split those, 2-1, I guess, and then you just give Salvon Ahmed some touches. But if Raheem Mostert wasn't able to go, I definitely would feel a lot worse about that run game. I think we all would.
Josh, I should have been calling you Debbie for most of this podcast because you've been negative. I should have called you Debbie Downer, negative Nancy. I don't know which one you prefer. But I want to ask you because a couple times throughout this podcast, we've started to walk down a road of, hey, this matchup, it kind of stacks up well for the Dolphins. And then we back up and say, well, it's Patrick Mahomes. It's Patrick Mahomes. Then we can't get too far ahead of ourselves. So maybe we should. I want to ask you this. Should we be confident that the Miami Dolphins can win on Sunday?
Well, I do have written down the last time they played, and I think that's kind of why we should feel a bit confident, right? I mean, the last time they played, Mahomes threw 3 interceptions. Tua went 28 of 48 for 316 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a 33-27 battle. This was in 2020 when he was a rookie, man. We had DeAndre Washington lead the team in rushing. Kelsey had 8 receptions. Lynn Bowden led the Dolphins with 7 receptions for 80-some yards. And then he was throwing to Lynn Bowden, Matt Collins, Mike Gesicki, Jakeem Grant, Adam Shaheen, Durham Smythe, DeAndre Washington, Malcolm Perry, Patrick Laird, Devontae Parker, and Antonio Callaway. So when you think that Tua, and to an extent, went toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes as a rookie in that game, I think that's what's giving me some life in this, to think that the Dolphins, made Mahomes' life a living hell. Yes, it was a completely different defense, but let's be honest, I think this defense is better than what we saw back then. So now I'm starting to get some life into me, man. Thinking about this, thinking about him throwing 3 picks, barely beating us to his rookie year, had that 20-yard sack Jerome Baker had. So I think that's why we should have some confidence in this, because we aren't the same old Dolphins. This is the best offense in football. This defense is starting to come together. We're starting to get guys back. That's why we should be confident. And I don't know that I believe any of what I just said.
Dude, I spent more than one podcast typing up Antonio Callaway about he was on the Browns. He'll be fine. He's going to be a good wide receiver. And now they have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. It's just, to me, it's just so funny to look big picture. Like, I was so excited for Brian Hartline to get 1,000 receiving yards. And there was that great game against Arizona where he didn't have any touchdowns. I think he had 260 yards or just 1 touchdown. And it was just a very weird game. And now you got Tyreek Hill who's getting 1,000 yards in 8 games. To me, I think there's the matchup of Kansas City's receivers who have done absolutely nothing to help Patrick Mahomes. You went and you traded for Kadarius Toney last year, and that's kind of been a dud. You expected him to be your number one. Sky Moore doesn't know how to catch a football. I'm not trying to be too harsh, but he's had some, drop issues recently. Can Miami's secondary just bully this entire Kansas City offense is what I'm going to be interested to see. Can Patrick Mahomes do enough where what was the complaint that Giselle had about Tom Brady? He can't catch and throw the football. We're going to find out on Sunday if Patrick Mahomes can catch and throw the football. And then we're going to have Kat on the show tomorrow. He had a tweet where, Josh, I think there are 4 different members of the Miami Dolphins who are on pace for 8 sacks or more. This entire unit is going to be a problem the rest of the year. I've been trying to send out the warning signs. I think this Vic Fangio defense, man, is about to be an absolute monster. And if you have sleepies in your eyes, man, it's going to be a pick 6. It's going to be over for you.
Well, we're probably all going to have sleepies watching this one, aren't we? I did think it was cool or interesting to hear Vic Fangio say how difficult it is to stop Patrick Mahomes, because he said you got to stop the play they call in the huddle, and then when the play breaks down, you got to, try to stop him from breaking down and extending the play. So I think Vic Fangio is going to have a way to stop this. And I do think you're right, Jake. When you look at that Miami Dolphins secondary, assuming Howard's back, Holland's back, Ramsey, Cater Kohu in the slot, I mean, you're looking at the Kansas City Chiefs skill players, and I did forget about Kadarius Toney. That's my bad. But I feel like the Dolphins could absolutely shut them down. Again, the only X factor would be that great quarterback they have. But you think about that secondary going toe-to-toe and locking up those receivers, then that lets that pass rush just sit back and feast, like you mentioned. Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips is starting to come on. Christian Wilkins is on pace to, get all that money for these sacks. So I'm starting to lean now. I was the Debbie Downer. My mom's name's Debbie, so you can call me Debbie. I was Debbie Houts for the first half of this podcast, and now I'm starting to, get excited and start to think, you know what, Jake, we are going to win this damn game.
It just seems like this is a matchup that works so well in the Dolphins' favor. And then you go to the other side of the football, right? The Chiefs are allowing 4.5 yards per carry. And this Dolphins offense, the way they run the football with this outside zone scheme, it's not like it's Javonte Williams, pounding the rock. It's not like you're facing the Chicago Bears when you're winning 41-10. This is going to be a tough test for that defense. And obviously, man, everyone's eyes are going to be on Chris Jones. And that's a big reason I think you're going to see someone like Connor Williams play, just so he can be out there to be that stabilizing force in the middle of the offense. I do think that is going to be so important. And I do think if you look back to Mike McDaniel's quotes in recent weeks, the concern about, Connor Williams re-aggravating things, and then Connor Williams being mad he's not playing, and then Mike McDaniel coming out and saying, he gets it. He's cool with it. He was stressed at the time, but it understands it and makes sense. That's stacking up to me. Like, this offensive line is going to have 4 of the 5 opening day starters ready to go.
Yeah, and I can't overlook their I guess he's second-year cornerback, Trent McDuffie. He's ranked 9th according to Pro Football Focus. Again, take that with a grain of salt. I just like to throw that out there. You can play on the inside, outsides, play 240 snaps in the slot, 131 on the outside. I do think he's there, the more shut-down corner of the two, and I wonder if they're going to have him matching up against Tyreek Hill, because I don't know if you saw it, Jake, but they asked I know you saw it. I'm sure you did. Andy Reid, his thoughts about Tyreek Hill. How do you stop him? And he's like, yeah, he's pretty good or something like that. He's kind of downplaying the whole thing in typical Andy Reid fashion. So I think the way that secondary matches up, I mean, I know they got Justin Reed lingering back there and some other playmakers.
L'Jarius Sneed.
Yeah, L'Jarius Sneed's solid. But I think Jalen Waddle, man, Tyreek Hill, I feel like they can, have a pretty good game against them. I guess you should look at that middle of that defense. Leo Chanel, a guy that a lot of Dolphin fans wanted in the draft, and I'm probably going to butcher that. No, Drew Tranquill. I got that name. He's leading the team in tackles and sacks, I believe. So they do have some playmakers in the middle of that field, and we do know that that's kind of, you mentioned Tyreek Hill against the New England Patriots. They kind of play that 3 safety look and kind of take away the middle of the field and kind of wait on those inbreakers. So we'll see the way this all pans out. But I think the Dolphins, matchup-wise, can we say that they might be the better team on paper? Can we say that? I mean,
I think so, dude. I think if
that's crazy. That is crazy when we were sitting there naming off Lynn Bowden and Mac Hollins and Malcolm Perry. I'm no disrespect to those guys, but you know what I'm saying, man. Times have changed.
I think the rushing attack can really dictate this game too. I think Raheem Mostert's going to have another big game. I think the Patriots game was just a very good cleansing for the Dolphins after, falling to the Eagles. The score was exactly the same. Yeah, man. And two, the Chiefs have some issues in the middle of the defense too. You have Nick Bolton, who was placed on IR last week. I think Willie Gay is listed as questionable for the game. So those are just 2 other linebackers in the middle of the field that could, not be a factor. To stick with the Dolphins offense, do you think that Mike McDaniel is going to try to force feed Tyreek the ball? Because even on his podcast, Tyreek even came out and said he thinks Mike's going to kind of try to get him the ball quite a bit.
I mean, you don't want him to do that, but I think he will, right? I mean, feel like the way Mike McDaniel is, the way he loves his players, the way he knows how much this game means to him, the way he realizes if you want to win this game, you got to get Tyreek Hill the ball, right? You got to find ways to get Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So I think he will force feed him. Maybe we even see him in the backfield, getting some carries here and there. I did look it up during that last game they had. He did have a carry for the Chiefs. So we'll see the way that plays out. And I'm looking here, and we didn't even mention Chris Jones, and maybe we were just trying to overlook him and not even talk about the boogeyman in the closet. But dude, I'm just thinking about Chris Jones going against, Eichenberg could be at center, and then at right guard it could be Rob Jones, who I love. But to think of Chris Jones, that's a little scary, man.
You're gonna have to do some motions, get some Durham Smythe running up in the backfield to come block him and different things like that. Overall, man, like that's why I wanted to kind of end this here with this kind of like confidence boost, because strangely enough, and I'm starting to hear this from bettors and things like that too. We've actually seen a swing. I think the Chiefs started as 5.5-point favorites. That's down to 1.5. And you think about game script and how things are going to go, man. I do see a scenario where the Dolphins can kind of pull away in this game just because Kansas City does not have those playmakers. Now, don't get me wrong. If they had Tyreek Hill, if they had 80% of a Tyreek Hill, just that game changer, spread the field out type player, when Patrick Mahomes can, finagle an extra somehow 10 seconds in the pocket, it seems, and then find that guy down the field. The Chiefs don't have that super, powerful, let's go get 40 yards with one type of catch type of player.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they thought they were getting that when they traded for Kadarius Toney, right? But like you mentioned earlier,
I thought they were. I thought that was an awesome.
We were all kind of stoked for that. We were all trying to pick him up on waivers or trade for him or do whatever. So, I think you're right, man. I think when you look at the Dolphins' offense, just all those playmakers, for as good as that defense has been for the Chiefs, I just feel like the Dolphins have the slight edge. But I'll be the first one to admit I've only watched a few Chiefs games this year, and again, I always go back to it, man. Patrick Mahomes, he's going to be the GOAT when it's all said and done.
All right, Joshua, we are wrapping up here on another episode of another Dolphins podcast, but we can't say goodbye without giving our game predictions. Josh, I pretty much gave mine away, so let me hear it. How you feel now after 36 minutes of therapy here?
Yeah, well, I was really cliche with my the way they can win this game. I said run the ball, get your playmakers the football, and control the line of scrimmage. Wow, it was really
score more points than your opponent.
Yeah, it really went out. Yeah, score more points than your opponents, pick up more yards on the ground. I had this game at I'm crazy. I think I was a little crazy. I'm sitting here trying to just go back and forth. I know we've said 31-14, 31-13, 31-17. We've done that a couple weeks in a row. So I'm going to go 27-24 Dolphins. Okay. We're going to get Jason Sanders' last second field goal in a soccer stadium, and the crowd's going to go crazy. They're going to, Jason Sanders. I don't know what they're going to be doing, but they'll be stoked for sure.
You'll I need a whole Jason Sanders song for that was pretty great.
I'm gonna be so sad hearing my voice on here, like, oh my god, that's what you sound like when you chant or sing.
So the over/under is set at 50.5, and I think this game might be under. And Josh, that leads me to believe like a 31-17. That's what you nailed the over. You hit 51 with your prediction there. God, it's so hard because I see that this Dolphins defense matches up so well with the Chiefs. And you got to say, well, Patrick Mahomes. If it was a, I don't know, quarterback that's ranked 5 through 12 in Madden, I'd say the Dolphins, yes, 31-17. But there is still that scary factor. But I do think this is the Dolphins team. They understand how important it is to win this game. They understand how important it is to enter the bye with a win over the Kansas City Chiefs. 27-14, Joshua. Let's do it. Let's get that win. Let's have it be a little bit of breathing room where they just kind of have the arm extended. They stay in front of them. I do think that the Chiefs are actually one of the worst teams in the red zone because they are forced to throw the football so much without having that playmaker who can, take that ball from the 40-yard line and bring it into the end zone. When you got a nickel and dime, you get less free real estate, man. It's harder and harder to move. So I'm hoping that this Dolphins defense turns into the unit we're expecting it to be and comes away with a nice dub in Germany.
Yeah, man. And then we'll all be sitting here just so stoked for 2 weeks. Because when you're sitting there saying, I was thinking how great that'd be for 2 weeks if we win this game. And then I was like, oh, no, man, that'd be so sad if we lost. But we're not even worried about that. We're not going to lose this one. And I think we're hyped now, man. I wish this game was being played tomorrow because, you've talked me into this and you got me hyped. And I think the Dolphins are going to do it, man. Let's see it. Let's go over to Frankfurt and win a meaningful game that, a lot of people might not think they are. But like you said, the spread's changing. So that isn't true at all.
Joshua Houts, you have said it all. It was great to be podcasting with you again. That is all the time we have today on another Dolphins podcast. Thank you so much for listening to our Week 9 game preview. We will be back actually tomorrow. I'll have Kat joining me with a final word for this matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins. But until then, fins up.
Fins up. Say fins up.
Fins up.
Love it.